Um, Good evening. Good evening. Good. I'm very much honored to be part of this conversation. And having read some of the things which have been discussed earlier, I mean, I just happened to read some of the posts which were shared. I think this is a very significant question that is being opened up in this group. And obviously, it has to be discussed at various levels. And I'm sure that this is an initial round of discussion that we are having. And now I have been actually reading on this question of merit for some time, which is actually part of my own research in certain ways, and also the kind of things that have been discussed in the public sphere. So, one question which I found as quite useful in understanding merit, which people might disagree as well, is to look at the context in which the idea of merit becomes important. Now, my understanding is that it is connected with capitalist development, the way we understand it. The idea of meritocracy, whether it is in the US or Western Europe, we seem to, at least I am sure some segment of the social scientists would view it in relation to the history of capitalist development, both in terms of its political economic dimension as well as ideological aspect of that, alongside the ways in which capitalist society has been organized. So, therefore, I think even in the case of India, when we really look at the question of merit, I think we need to really signpost this particular aspect. Now, the other point, which I think, which I'm sure the esteemed uh, experts in the field would also know, is that if we look at the uh, way in which the idea of merit articulated in India, got articulated in India, it was connected with actually colonial rule, colonial political economy, and so on. But if we look at what is being today talked about as merit, in terms of admissions in specialized academic programs. I mean, I'm just reducing it to bare minimum essentials. If we look at uh, the sort of specializations which require, according to the common parlance, what you call this so-called merit, whether it is engineering education or medical education and several other specialized fields of science and technology, or fields where we have science and technology becoming very, very significant. It is there that most people would bring in this argument of merit, especially when you select people and so on. But my argument is that if you look at the history of India, we find that the communities that are being today generally talked about as falling under the reserved categories, which some would say lack what we call merit and so on. These were the people. There is nothing new in what I'm saying now, but if you look at several segments of the OBCs or Dalit communities and so on, we would soon realize that there were the people who were actually historically engaged in um, the production of valuable things. If you are looking at goods and services historically, who produced it? Like, for example, we have different segments of the Vishwakarma community who were actually engaged in what today we might refer to as, part of engineering profession, whether it is construction of buildings or designing of things. We can actually proliferate this example. We could talk about the ways in which the designs used to be evolved historically, or buildings used to be imagined, or the ways in which masonry would be executed, or the ways in which carpentry could be executed. So just let us take all these examples. And these are today part of the modern profession, what we call as different specializations within engineering. But interestingly, these have been historically done by the sort of communities today we refer, I mean, categorized as OBCs. So if you look at another example of agricultural production, then you find that large segments of Dalit communities have been engaged in taking crops, preparing fields, whichever crop people have been cultivating. And I guess this is true all across India. These have been the work of, the oppressed past, and they knew what sort of, uh, seeds to be sown, the seasonal variations, and what sort of technologies need to be used in water management. Even it was very much true in Kerala also. If you look at the backwater agriculture and all of this, so without mincing much words, what I want to suggest is, or open up for discussion, is that if you look at agriculture or any other useful craft, whether it is in Kerala or elsewhere in India, there you find that these socially useful labor used to be supplied by the communities that have been relegated as so-called meritless as today. Now, I mean, we can take any number of examples. If you look at leather industry, so today we have a number of national level institutes specializing in leather technology and so on. But I may be excused for the wild generalization. But take the history of that, and we soon realize that this particular specialization happened to be with the Dalit communities in most parts of India or all over India. In fact, nobody else would, deal with hides and skins and so on. So we can identify a number of, or almost every aspect of, commodity production, where imagination was required, where physical labor was required. We find people from these communities. But when these professions got organized in the modern way, then we find there the dominance of communities or individuals which that were not historically ever part of this. So, I mean, this has been argued beautifully by Ajanta Subramanian in one of the recent books, which actually explores the question of engineering education, taking the case of Madras IIT, the long history of these institutionalized forms of engineering education that actually brought in this idea of merit, which she interestingly refers to as cast of merit, which happens to be the title of the book. Now, so what I want to say is just this. So the merit has got a very specific, I mean, it is used in a very specific historical context. And those of us in social science research would, I'm sure many of you are part of this in your own respective fields, would think of it as something like, a certain process by which the idea of merit itself was historically constructed, and which is, as I said, connected with the history of capitalism and so on. So, therefore, today, when we talk about merit, there is a general assumption that it is a sort of a priori thing. People assume that there is something merit which is out there. So my argument is that there is nothing called merit which is out there, and this is something which anybody could acquire. So let us, I mean, if you take any profession, any sort of technical training or specialized sort of, qualities that we can nurture in individuals, which could be done through proper training. If we give sort of education to everybody, where these sort of things are required, and I'm sure that we can really come up with meritorious individuals from any social group. And in fact, we do have a number of examples from I mean, anywhere in India. In fact, if you look at people who are part of these modern professions, we do find a number of people from OBC background or Dalit background and so on who have come up excellently in their specialized fields. And my last point is that, in fact, we could see the same people could be referred to as people without merit. This has happened in the context of many central universities in India, not just of late. It has been there for a very long time. There was a certain kind of institutional bias towards, which I referred to at some point as it's something like a systemic caste which is operating, which actually referred to people as meritless. So my submission for this evening discussion is that we should really interrogate this whole idea of merit and the ways in which it has been created. Now, one could, as I have gone through the concept note, which is part of this discussion, the Brahmanical notion of what merit is all about. And in fact, we need to bring in both this, the capitalist notion of merit, which has been really integrated into what we call, the historically handed down kind of idea of merit, which is in fact baseless as far as India is concerned. So, and I think we should have a very strong historical argument, which is really connected with contemporary social and economic development, where we can actually, show how this whole idea of merit has been constituted through legal discourses, through other sorts of discourses in the public sphere. So this is a kind of initial ideas that I have to share. So thank you very much, and I stop here. Thank you.